At exactly 11:47 a.m., on a Tuesday that started like any other, 11-year-old Marcus Thompson faced the biggest decision of his young life. Gunshots had just shattered the morning calm. A police dog lay bleeding in an alley, and every instinct screamed at him to run. But as he crouched behind that mailbox, watching Thor's life pour out onto the cold concrete, Marcus remembered his mother's words.
"You're the strongest person I know."
What happened next would transform not just Marcus and Thor, but an entire community. The boy who had been selling candy bars for 50 cents each to buy his mother's medicine was about to make a choice that would land him on national television, inspire thousands of people, and prove that heroes really can emerge from the most impossible circumstances. This is the true story of how a street kid's split-second decision in the face of danger created a bond so powerful it would change the definition of courage itself. You won't believe what this extraordinary partnership accomplished, or where it ultimately led them both. The shrill beep of a broken alarm clock pierced through the darkness at exactly 5 a.m., its cracked face casting eerie shadows across the peeling wallpaper of apartment 3B. Marcus Thompson's eyes snapped open, not from the alarm, but from the same internal clock that had been jolting him awake for the past 8 months. At 11 years old, he had learned that survival didn't wait for anyone, not even children who should have been dreaming of baseball games and summer vacations. He slipped out of the threadbare mattress he shared with his 7-year-old sister Emma, his bare feet hitting the ice-cold linoleum floor. The apartment's broken heater had given up 3 weeks ago, and the landlord's promises to fix it had grown as cold as the morning air, seeping through the cracked windows. Marcus pulled his thin jacket tighter around his shoulders, the same jacket he'd been wearing for 2 years, too small now, with sleeves that barely reached his wrists, but still his only defense against the bitter October chill. Emma lay curled in a tight ball, her small body trying to conserve warmth under the single blanket they shared. Her dark hair spilled across the pillow like silk, and for a moment Marcus allowed himself to remember when she used to wake up giggling, when their biggest worry was whether Mom would make pancakes or waffles for breakfast. Now, Emma's face, even in sleep, carried worry lines too deep for a 7-year-old. Lines that mirrored the constant knot of anxiety in Marcus's stomach. "Sleep a little longer, Em," he whispered, gently tucking the blanket under her chin. She stirred slightly, a small smile crossing her lips as she unconsciously recognized her brother's protective presence. Marcus tiptoed across the cramped living room, stepping carefully around the buckets they'd placed to catch water from the leak in the ceiling. The apartment that had once been cheerful yellow, now hung in sad strips, revealing water-stained plaster underneath. The couch, a hand-me-down from their church, sagged in the middle, where the springs had broken. But despite the decay, Marcus had tried to keep their small home as clean as possible, sweeping the floors every night and washing their few dishes in cold water, since the hot water heater had died last month. He approached the bedroom where his mother lay, and his heart performed its daily ritual of clenching with fear and hope. Through the partially open door, he could see her thin form under the covers, her breathing shallow but steady. Sarah Thompson had once been the strongest woman Marcus knew, working double shifts as a waitress, singing while she cleaned their old apartment, always finding ways to make even the toughest days feel like adventures. Now, at 32, illness had stolen her strength, leaving her barely able to sit up most days. "Morning, Mom," he whispered, though he knew she probably couldn't hear him. through the fog of pain medication that was their only mercy. The prescription bottles on her nightstand stood like tiny soldiers, expensive soldiers that consumed most of Marcus's daily earnings. He watched her chest rise and fall, counting each breath like a prayer. In the kitchen, Marcus opened the refrigerator and stared at their meager supplies. Half a loaf of bread, a small container of milk that would expire tomorrow, and the last box of generic cereal. He calculated quickly: the cereal for Emma's breakfast, the bread for her lunch, and the milk to make both palatable. For himself, he'd grab a piece of bread on his way out, though his stomach had long since stopped protesting its daily emptiness. As he poured the cereal into a chipped bowl, Marcus's mind wandered to the questions that haunted him every waking moment. What if Mom gets worse? The thought hit him like a punch to the gut. The doctor had said the surgery could help, but it would cost more money than Marcus could imagine earning in his lifetime. What if Emma gets sick too? He glanced toward the living room where his sister slept, and his chest tightened with the fierce protectiveness that had become his defining characteristic. What if they evict us this month? They were already 2 months behind on rent, and Mrs. Rodriguez, their landlord, had been making increasingly urgent phone calls. With practiced silence, Marcus prepared Emma's breakfast, placing the bowl on their moments of normalcy. These tiny gestures of childhood whimsy were his gifts to his sister, proof that somewhere, under all the responsibility and fear, her big brother was still there. Marcus retrieved his worn backpack from beside the couch, its fabric faded and one strap held together with duct tape. Inside were the tools of his trade: 43 candy bars he'd bought wholesale from a supplier on the east side of town, each one representing hope and survival. He'd learned to buy the brands that sold best: Snickers for the high school kids, Kit Kats for the office workers, and colorful gummy bears for the elementary students, who sometimes had enough pocket money for a treat. From beneath his mattress, he pulled out a torn sock that contained his life savings: $23.50 in crumpled bills and loose change. He counted it slowly, his fingers trembling slightly as he calculated the impossible math of their survival. Medicine for Mom, $15. Groceries for the week, at least $20. Rent, $180 short. The numbers never added up, no matter how many times he counted, no matter how hard he worked. But Marcus had learned something important in these past 8 months. Giving up wasn't an option when people were counting on you. As he shouldered his backpack and prepared to face another day on the streets, he whispered a promise to the quiet apartment: "I'll figure it out. I always do." The door closed softly behind him, and another day began. By 6:30 a.m., Marcus had claimed his territory outside Roosevelt Elementary School, the same corner where he'd been selling candy for the past 5 months. He'd chosen this spot carefully, close enough to the school to catch kids before classes started, near enough to the main road for adult commuters, but far enough from the principal's office to avoid questions about why an 11-year-old was conducting business instead of attending classes. He spread his inventory on a small folding table he'd bought from a garage sale, arranging the candy bars in neat rows like a miniature grocery store. The morning air bit through his thin jacket, and he rubbed his hands together to keep them warm as he watched the familiar rhythm of the neighborhood wake up. At 7:15, the first customers began to appear. Middle school students walking to the bus stop, their backpacks heavy with textbooks Marcus wished he could carry. They looked so normal, so carefree, laughing about weekend plans and complaining about upcoming tests. Marcus watched them with a mixture of longing and determination. Someday, he promised himself, Emma would walk to school like that, worried about nothing more serious than a math quiz. "Morning, Marcus." The warm voice belonged to Mrs. Chen, elderly woman who worked as a crossing guard at the elementary school. She approached his table with her usual gentle smile, her kind eyes crinkling at the corner. First regular customers, and over the months she'd become something like the grandmother he'd never had. "Good morning, Mrs. Chen," Marcus replied, straightening up and putting on his best business smile, the one he'd perfected to hide the constant worry that gnawed at his insides. "2 Kit Kats as usual," she said, placing $3 on the table. "And how is your mother feeling today?" Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his throat that came whenever someone asked about his mom. Mrs. Chen was the only customer who knew about his family's situation, and her genuine concern never failed to touch something deep in his chest. "About the same," he said quietly, making change for her purchase. "But the doctor says the new medicine might help." Mrs. Chen's weathered hand reached across the table and briefly covered his. "You're a good boy, Marcus. Your mother is lucky to have you." After she left, Marcus watched her cross the street to her post, her bright orange vest making her look like a beacon of safety in the morning chaos. He wished he could tell her everything. About the medical bills, about Emma sleeping in a cold apartment, about the crushing weight of being responsible for his family's survival. But even at 11, Marcus understood that some burdens were too heavy to share. The morning rush continued. A group of teenagers approached his table, and Marcus tensed slightly. Most high school kids were decent customers, but some enjoyed making the candy boy squirm. "Hey, street vendor," called Jake Martinez, a sophomore who sometimes bought Snickers bars. "Don't you ever go to school?" "I'm homeschooled," Marcus replied smoothly, the lie rolling off his tongue with practiced ease. He'd learned that people asked fewer questions if they thought they understood his situation. "Yeah, right," laughed one of Jake's friends. "Bet you can't even read." Marcus felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger, but he kept his expression neutral. Fighting back would only make things worse, and he needed every potential customer he could get. Jake, however, surprised him. "Shut up, Trevor. The kid's trying to make money. That's more than you do." He placed $2 on the table, 2 Snickers bars. "Thanks," Marcus said, genuinely grateful for the unexpected defense. As the teenagers walked away, Marcus heard Jake say, "My mom works at the hospital. She says lots of families are struggling right now. Cut the kids some slack." The morning continued with its usual mix of customers, some kind, some indifferent, a few openly suspicious of a child selling candy on the street. Around 10 a.m., Marcus noticed a small figure approaching his table hesitantly. It was a boy, maybe 8 years old, with clothes even more worn than Marcus's own. His shoes had holes in the toes, and his jacket was several sizes too big. "How much for a chocolate bar?" the boy asked, his voice barely above a whisper. $2, Marcus fall. The child dug in his pocket and produced a handful of coins, counting them carefully. "I only have 75 cents, the boy said, his disappointment evident. Marcus looked at the boy, really looked at him, and saw himself 6 months ago, before he'd figured out the candy business, when hunger was a constant companion, and every day was a battle for survival. Without hesitation, he picked up a Hershey's bar and handed it to the child. 75 cents sounds right to me, Marcus said with a smile. The boy's face lit up like Christmas morning. Really? Thank you. He carefully placed his coins on the table and clutched the chocolate bar like it was made of gold. As Marcus watched the boy skip away, He felt something warm in his chest, despite the cold morning air. It was the same feeling he got when Emma hugged him at night, when his mother smiled during her good moments. The feeling of being needed, of making a difference, of being more than just another kid trying to survive on the streets. By 2 p.m., Marcus had sold 31 candy bars, earning $18.75. He counted the money carefully, his quick mind automatically calculating, enough for his mother's afternoon medicine, enough for dinner tonight, but still far short of what they needed for rent, groceries, and Emma's school supplies. As he packed up his remaining inventory, Marcus noticed increased police activity in the area. 3 patrol cars had passed by in the last hour, and he could sense tension in the way people walked, faster, with more purpose, glancing over their shoulders. Drug activity had been increasing in this neighborhood over the past few weeks, and Marcus had learned to read the signs of trouble. He'd grown familiar with most of the police officers who patrolled this area, learning their routines and personalities from a distance. Officer Peterson, the tall man with the kind eyes, who always nodded when he passed Marcus's corner. Officer Rodriguez, the woman who sometimes stopped to buy candy for her own children. And Thor, the magnificent German shepherd who rode with Officer Peterson, alert and intelligent, clearly devoted to his human partner. Marcus had always been fascinated by Thor, admiring the dog's obvious intelligence and unwavering loyalty. Sometimes he caught himself imagining what it would be like to have that kind of partnership, that kind of trust and mutual protection. In his fantasies, Marcus was the one with the badge, the one protecting others, instead of just trying to survive each day. As another police car cruised by, Marcus made a mental note to be extra careful over the next future. Tomorrow would bring another day on the corner, another chance to earn enough to keep them going. In Marcus's world, that was all anyone could ask for. Another day, another chance, another small victory against impossible odds. The walk home took Marcus through streets that told the story of a neighborhood caught between hope and despair. Past the corner grocery store, where Mr. Patel always asked about his grades, even though Marcus hadn't attended school in weeks. Past the community center where Emma sometimes played after school, when other kids' parents picked them up and she had nowhere else to go. Past the church, where they used to attend Sunday services before his mother became too weak to make the journey. Marcus climbed the 3 flights of stairs to their apartment, each step echoing in the narrow hallway that smelled of cooking spices and broken dreams. The familiar sound of Mrs. Rodriguez's television drifted through her door, a Spanish soap opera playing at high volume. At least she was home, which meant she wouldn't be knocking on their door tonight, demanding rent money they didn't have. He turned his key in the lock and stepped into the apartment, immediately sensing something different. Light, actual electric light, was streaming from the kitchen. "Marcus!" Emma's voice rang out with pure joy as she launched herself at him from the kitchen table. "The lights came back on." Marcus caught her in a bear hug, spinning her around despite his exhaustion. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and for a moment he allowed himself to feel the simple pleasure of his sister's happiness. Emma's smile could light up the darkest room, and Marcus often thought it was unfair that someone so young had to find such joy in basic necessities like electricity. "Did you pay the bill?" Emma asked innocently, settling back at the kitchen table, where her homework was spread out under the welcome glow of the overhead light. "I called them and worked out a payment plan," Marcus lied smoothly. The truth was, he had no idea why their power had been restored, but he wasn't about to question this small miracle. Maybe Mrs. Rodriguez had paid it as part of the building's expenses, or perhaps there had been some kind of administrative error. Whatever the reason, they had light and heat for tonight, and that was enough. Marcus looked at Emma's homework, third-grade math problems that he could solve in his head, but he knew the importance of letting her work through them herself. Education was the one thing he was determined to protect for his sister, even if his own had been sacrificed on the altar of survival. "Having trouble with any of these?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her. "Just this one." Emma pointed to a word problem about sharing cookies among friends. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. Here was his sister learning about sharing treats, while their own cupboards were nearly bare. "Okay, let's think about it together," Marcus said patiently. "If Tommy has 12 cookies and wants to share them equally among 4 friends, how many cookies does each friend get?" Emma's brow furrowed in concentration, and Marcus watched her work through the problem. Her intelligence shone in moments like these, and he felt a fierce pride mixed with determination. Emma deserved better than this apartment, better than wearing the same 3 outfits to school, better than worrying whether there would be dinner each night. 3, Emma announced triumphantly. "Each friend gets 3 cookies." "Perfect," Marcus said, ruffling her hair. "You're getting so smart, Em. Smarter than me, that's for sure." "That's not true," Emma protested, with the fierce loyalty that always made Marcus's heart ache. "You're the smartest person I know. You know how to take care of Mom, and you know how to make money, and you know how to fix things when they break." Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest. At 7 years old, Emma had already learned to see him as something more than a big brother. He was her protector, her provider, her anchor in a world that had become unpredictable and scary. The weight of that responsibility sometimes felt crushing, but Emma's faith in him also gave him strength he didn't know he possessed. After Emma finished her homework, Marcus made their simple dinner, peanut butter sandwiches and the last of the milk, stretched with a little water to make it last longer. They ate while Emma chattered about her day at school, telling him about the art project she was working on and the new girl who sat next to her at lunch. "Mrs. Patterson asked where you were again," Emma said between bites of sandwich. "I told her you were sick, like always." Marcus nodded. Emma had become an expert at covering for his absences, understanding instinctively that questions about why her brother wasn't in school could lead to investigations they couldn't afford. Child services had been mentioned once by a well-meaning neighbor, and Marcus had lived in terror for weeks afterward, knowing that any official scrutiny would tear their family apart. After dinner, Marcus performed his most important daily ritual, checking on his mother. He knocked gently on her bedroom door and entered to find her awake, propped up against pillows, looking frail but alert. "How was your day, sweetheart?" Sarah Thompson's voice was weak but warm, and Marcus felt the familiar mixture of love and heartbreak that came with seeing his once strong mother reduced to this shadow of herself. "Good, Mom. Made enough for groceries and your medicine." He settled into the chair beside her bed, the same chair he'd occupied for countless hours over the past months, reading to her, talking about his day, simply being present when words weren't enough. His mother's eyes filled with tears, not from pain this time, but from a deeper anguish that Marcus understood all too well. "I'm so sorry, Marcus," she whispered. "You should be playing with friends, going to school, being a normal 11-year-old boy. Instead, you're taking care of all of us." Marcus reached for her hand, surprised as always by how thin it had become. "Mom, you took care of us for years before you got sick. Now it's my turn. That's what families do. We take care of each other." "You're the strongest person I know," she said, echoing words she'd spoken to him many times before. But tonight they carried extra weight, extra meaning. Stronger than me, stronger than most adults. I don't know how I raised such an incredible son. Marcus felt tears threatening and blinked them back. He needed to be strong, needed to be the rock his family could depend on. "You're going to get better, Mom. The doctor said the new treatment could help. We just have to keep trying." They sat together in comfortable silence, and Marcus read to her from a library book, a mystery novel she'd picked out during one of her better days. His mother drifted in and out of sleep, but Marcus knew his presence comforted her, just as her quiet breathing comforted him. Later that night, after Emma was asleep and his mother had taken her evening medication, Marcus stood at their small living room window, looking out at the city lights that stretched to the horizon. The view from their third-floor apartment wasn't much, mostly other run-down buildings and empty lots. But on clear nights like this, Marcus could see all the way to downtown, where the office buildings glowed like beacons of possibility. Somewhere out there were people living different lives, families who didn't worry about keeping the lights on, kids who attended school every day and complained about homework, parents who were healthy and strong. Marcus didn't resent those people. Instead, he studied them from afar, trying to understand the path that led to that kind of stability. He thought about Mrs. Chen's kind words, about Jake's unexpected defense, about the homeless boy who'd walked away clutching a chocolate bar like treasure. These small moments of human connection sustained him, reminding him that kindness existed even in the hardest circumstances. Marcus pulled out a notebook he'd found in a dumpster behind the school, barely used, with most of the pages still blank. In it, he'd been writing down his thoughts, his plans, his dreams for a different future. Tonight he wrote, "I will find a way to pay for Mom's surgery. I will make sure Emma gets to finish school and go to college. I will become someone who can protect other families like ours. I don't know how yet, but I will figure it out. I have to." As he wrote, Marcus felt something shift inside him, a crystallizing of purpose that went beyond simple survival. He wanted to be more than just a kid selling candy on street corners. He wanted to be the kind of person others could depend on, the kind of person who made a real difference in the world. The city lights twinkled in the distance like stars, and Marcus made a promise to those lights, to his sleeping family and to himself. Tomorrow would be another day of fighting for their future, another day of refusing to give up, another day of proving that sometimes the smallest acts of courage could change everything. He had no way of knowing that tomorrow would test that courage in ways he never imagined, or that a moment of extraordinary bravery would indeed change everything, not just for his family, but for an entire community. All Marcus knew was that he would face whatever came next with the same determination that had carried him through every impossible day so far. The notebook closed softly, and Marcus prepared for sleep, unaware that destiny was already moving through the streets below, bringing together the threads of a story that would inspire thousands and prove that heroes truly could emerge from the most unexpected places. Thursday morning started like any other for Marcus, but by 9 a.m. he could sense something different in the air around Roosevelt Elementary. It was subtle at first, the way Mrs. Patterson hurried past his corner without her usual friendly wave, the nervous energy of pedestrians who seemed to be walking faster than normal, their heads down and shoulders hunched as if trying to make themselves invisible. Marcus had been selling candy from his corner for 5 months now, long enough to develop an almost supernatural awareness of the neighborhood's rhythms and moods. He could predict which days would be good for business based on the weather, the time of month, and even the general atmosphere on the street. Today felt different, charged with an undercurrent of tension that made his skin prickle with unease. The first concrete sign that something was wrong came when Mr. Patel emerged from his corner grocery store and began pulling in the sidewalk displays of fruit and newspapers that usually stayed out until evening. Marcus watched with growing concern as the elderly shop owner's movements seemed hurried, almost frantic, his usual calm demeanor replaced by obvious anxiety. "Mr. Patel!" Marcus called out, his voice carrying across the street. "Is everything okay?" The shop owner paused in his work, glancing nervously up and down the street before responding. "You should go home today, Marcus. he called back, his accented English carrying a note of genuine worry. "Police say there might be trouble in the area. Drug dealers? Maybe worse." Marcus felt his stomach clench with familiar fear, but not the kind that would make him pack up and leave. He had earned only $12 so far today, nowhere near the $25 he needed to buy his mother's evening medication and put dinner on the table. The arithmetic of survival was unforgiving. No sales meant no medicine. No medicine meant watching his mother suffer through another night of pain that could have been prevented. As if summoned by his thoughts about police activity, a patrol car rounded the corner and cruised slowly down the street. Marcus.
This could be few reservstand her say so. Save her arbstits when we did not ask her freeze. To become save her feared. New feared when we reach up why then to spectum when the say for the world waves with his aura. Petrine, if we see here rotor. The car from Pline by the Asker V in Jane. Mars, Kane Fleeds. Car, once Peters. To birds as fruns 40. Peterson side times. To sidey. Peterson he. Signs, Mercis. Porting say 40. Becomes surveyor hand. Carful. Becomes surveyor. To side y. And they go, will no horse. 1. Is rered de beer. See, he. Goling safe as safe some hand. Peterson safe's times. Safe. Save I feared. What safe times? Be our rid de beer. Safe spas. Is our rid de beer. Then is our rid de beer. Day free. May safe place. May safe only. Be our rid de beer. Is our rid de beer. The are rid de beer. They are rid de beer. They are rid de beer. The are rid de beer. The are rid de beer. The presented myrrh. They spas. Going. Go 1. Spas. Alert today, son, Peterson said quietly as he passed. If you see anything unusual, anything that doesn't feel right, you call 911 immediately. Don't try to be a hero. Marcus nodded solemnly, understanding the gravity in the officer's voice. As Peterson and Thor continued their patrol, Marcus watched them move with synchronized precision, Thor's keen senses extending Peterson's awareness, Peterson's tactical training guiding their response to potential threats. The radio chatter from other patrol cars grew more frequent and urgent throughout the morning. Marcus caught phrases that made his blood run cold. Armed and dangerous, shots fired report. All units converge on Sector 7. By 11 a.m. he had counted 6 different police vehicles passing through the area, each one contributing to the atmosphere of impending crisis. Despite his growing unease, Marcus forced himself to focus on his work. Fear was a luxury his family couldn't afford. Every candy bar sold brought them closer to survival for another day. And that simple mathematics had to override his instincts for self-preservation. As his mother had always told him, sometimes being strong meant staying when others would run. He had no way of knowing that in less than an hour those words would be tested in ways neither he nor his mother could have ever imagined. The first gunshot shattered the morning air like a thunderclap, echoing off the brick buildings and sending a jolt of pure adrenaline through Marcus's 11-year-old body. For a split second he wondered if it had been a car backfiring or construction equipment, but the screams that followed left no doubt about what he had heard. "Get down! Get down!" The voice came from somewhere behind him, and Marcus instinctively dropped behind his candy table, his heart hammering against his ribs so hard he thought it might burst. More gunshots followed, rapid staccato bursts that spoke of automatic weapons and serious firepower. People on the street erupted into chaos. A woman pushing a stroller sprinted toward the elementary school, her baby's cries mixing with her own panicked shouts. An elderly man stumbled and fell, scrambling on his hands and knees toward the dubious shelter of a parked car. The normal sounds of the neighborhood, traffic, conversation, children playing, were replaced by a symphony of terror, screaming, running footsteps, car doors slamming, and underneath it all, more gunshots.
Marcus pressed himself against the cold metal of a mailbox, trying to make himself as small as possible while his mind raced to process what was happening. The shooting seemed to be coming from the direction of Maple Street, 2 blocks away, where he knew there were several abandoned buildings that had become havens for drug activity. Through the chaos, Marcus spotted Officer Peterson and Thor responding to the emergency. Even in crisis, their partnership was a thing of beauty to observe. Peterson moved with tactical precision, his weapon drawn but controlled, while Thor flanked him perfectly, covering angles that the officer couldn't see. Their radio crackled with urgent communications as they approached the source of the gunfire. From his position behind the mailbox, Marcus had an unobstructed view down the alley where Peterson and Thor were advancing. What he saw next would be seared into his memory forever. 3 men emerged from behind a dumpster, weapons raised, as Peterson and Thor rounded the corner. But it wasn't a fair fight. It was an ambush. The officer and his dog had walked into a carefully laid trap, with more criminals positioned on rooftops and in doorways, creating a deadly crossfire that left them exposed from multiple angles. "Drop your weapons!" Peterson's voice rang out with authority, but the suspects had no intention of surrendering. The alley erupted in gunfire, muzzle flashes strobing like deadly fireworks as bullets ricocheted off brick walls and metal fire escapes. Thor moved like liquid lightning, staying low and using his incredible speed to create confusion among the attackers. The dog's tactical training was evident in every movement. He was not just Peterson's companion, but a full partner in law enforcement, trained to neutralize threats and protect his handler at all costs. The turning point came when a 4th gunman appeared from a hidden position, flanking Peterson from the left, while the officer was engaged with the 3 suspects in front of him. The ambusher raised his weapon, and Marcus could see that Peterson was completely exposed, unaware of the threat materializing behind him. That's when Thor proved why canine units were so invaluable to law enforcement. The German Shepherd spotted the flanking attacker an instant before he could fire and launched himself through the air in a flying tackle that would have made any football coach proud. Dog and gunman went down in a tangle of fur, fabric, and flailing limbs, but the gunman managed to get off one shot before Thor's jaws clamped down on his gun arm. The bullet caught the brave dog in the side, and Thor's yelp of pain and surprise cut through Marcus like a physical blow. The sound was so full of shock and hurt that Marcus actually flinched, pressing his hands to his ears as if he could block out the reality of what he had just witnessed. The gunman struggled to free himself from Thor's grip, and in the chaos, a wild shot struck the brick wall directly beside Peterson's head. The officer was struck by falling debris and went down hard, his weapon skittering across the alley floor as he fell unconscious. With Peterson down and Thor wounded, the tactical situation collapsed completely. The remaining gunmen realized that backup sirens were approaching fast, the distinctive wail of multiple patrol cars converging on their position, and made the decision to flee rather than fail. Unconscious form, and Thor, who was struggling to stand despite the blood flowing freely from the wound in his side. The magnificent German Shepherd tried to position himself protectively over his fallen partner, but his strength was failing rapidly. Blood was pooling beneath him, and his normally bright eyes were growing dim with shock and blood loss. Marcus watched in horror as Thor's legs gave out, and the dog collapsed beside Peterson, his breathing becoming shallow and labored. Even wounded, possibly dying, Thor's instincts were to protect his partner. The dog's muzzle rested against Peterson's arm, and his eyes remained fixed on the approaches to the alley, still trying to guard against further threats, even as his life ebbed away. The sound of approaching sirens grew louder, but Marcus could see that they might not arrive in time. Thor was bleeding heavily, and Peterson remained motionless on the cold asphalt. In that moment, watching two heroes who had risked everything to protect their community lying helpless in that alley, Marcus faced a choice that would define the rest of his life. Every instinct screamed at him to stay hidden, to wait for the professionals to arrive, to think of his own safety and his family's need for him to come home unharmed. But another voice, quieter but stronger, reminded him of his mother's words about being strong, about Thor's courage in protecting Peterson, about the kind of person he wanted to become. The sirens were still blocks away, and Thor was running out of time. In that crucial moment, Marcus Thompson had to decide what kind of man he was going to be. Time seemed to slow to a crawl as Marcus crouched behind the mailbox, watching Thor's blood spread across the alley floor in an ever-widening pool. Every rational thought in his head screamed at him to stay hidden, to wait for the police backup that was racing toward them with sirens wailing. He was 11 years old, barely 5 feet tall, and had no medical training beyond the basic first aid he'd learned from necessity during his mother's illness. But Thor was dying. Marcus could see it in the way the dog's breathing had become shallow and rapid, in the glassy look that was creeping into those intelligent brown eyes, in the way Thor's attempts to lift his head were becoming weaker with each passing second. Officer Peterson remained unconscious, a trickle of blood running from his forehead where the debris had struck him. "You're the strongest person I know," his mother's words echoed in his mind, spoken just last night as he'd sat by her bedside. Strongest. The word carried weight beyond physical power. It spoke to character, to the willingness to do what was right, even when it was terrifying. Marcus thought of Thor's incredible bravery just moments before, the way the dog had launched himself at the gunman without hesitation, knowing he was putting himself in mortal danger to protect his partner. If an excuse did a human being have for standing by and doing nothing? The sirens were getting closer, but they were still blocks away, maybe 3 or 4 minutes at minimum. Marcus had spent enough time on these streets to know that blood loss could kill in much less time than that. He'd seen it during a gang shooting 6 months ago, watched a teenager bleed out on the sidewalk while paramedics fought through traffic that seemed to move with agonizing slowness. His hands were shaking as he made the decision that would change his life forever. Without allowing himself time to reconsider, Marcus abandoned the safety of his hiding place and sprinted toward the alley, his worn sneakers slapping against the concrete as he ran toward the two fallen heroes. The alley smelled of gunpowder and fear, with an underlying metallic scent that Marcus recognized as blood. He skidded to his knees beside Thor, his heart breaking as he saw the extent of the dog's injuries up close. The bullet had torn through Thor's side, creating a wound that was pumping blood with each heartbeat. "Oh God," Marcus whispered, his voice cracking with emotion and terror. But even as panic threatened to overwhelm him, his street-smart survival instincts kicked in. He'd learned basic first aid out of necessity. When you lived in a neighborhood where violence was common and ambulances were often delayed, you learned to take care of yourself and others. Without hesitation, Marcus stripped off his jacket and then his shirt, the only clean shirt he owned, the one he'd been saving to wear to the library later that week. The fabric was thin but relatively clean, and right now it represented Thor's best chance of survival. "Stay with me, boy," Marcus said, his voice shaking but growing stronger with each word as he pressed the shirt against Thor's wound. The blood immediately began soaking through the fabric, warm and sticky against his hands. "You're going to be okay. You saved everyone today, you hear me? You're a hero, Thor." Thor's eyes found Marcus's face, and despite his pain and weakness, the dog's tail gave the faintest wag of recognition. It was as if Thor understood that this young boy was trying to help him, and some part of his canine consciousness was grateful for the comfort and aid. Marcus maintained pressure on the wound with one hand, while checking Officer Peterson's pulse with the other. The officer's heartbeat was strong and steady, a good sign, but he remained unconscious, with blood trickling from the gash on his forehead. Looking around desperately, Marcus spotted a cell phone that had been dropped during the chaos, probably by one of the fleeing civilians. He grabbed it with his free hand, grateful to see that it was still functional, despite a cracked screen. With fingers that trembled, but system. "This is Marcus Thompson at the corner of Roosevelt and Maple," he said, pressing the phone between his shoulder and ear, so he could maintain pressure on Thor's wound. "Officer Peterson and his canine partner have been shot. The officer is unconscious but breathing. The dog is bleeding heavily from his side and needs immediate medical attention." "Are you in a safe location?" the dispatcher asked. "Yes. The shooters have fled. I can hear backup sirens approaching, but the dog is losing a lot of blood. He needs a veterinary emergency team as well as paramedics. Stay on the line with me. Are you trained in first aid?" "I'm keeping pressure on the dog's wound," Marcus replied, looking down at Thor, whose breathing seemed to be stabilizing slightly. "I used my shirt to try to stop the bleeding." "Good work. Keep doing exactly what you're doing. Help is almost there." As if summoned by the dispatcher's words, the first patrol car screeched around the corner, followed immediately by an ambulance and what Marcus assumed must be a veterinary emergency vehicle. The professionals took over with efficient speed, but not before the lead paramedic looked at Marcus with something approaching amazement. "Son, you probably saved this dog's life," the paramedic said as he examined Marcus's makeshift bandaging. "Your quick thinking and pressure on the wound prevented him from bleeding out. How old are you?" 11, Marcus replied, suddenly feeling very young and very small as the adrenaline began to fade from his system. 11 years old, and you ran into an active shooting scene to help an injured officer and his partner." The paramedic shook his head in disbelief. "That's either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever seen. Probably both." As the medical teams worked to stabilize both Peterson and Thor, Marcus stepped back, suddenly aware that he was shirtless in the cool morning air and covered in blood that wasn't his own. His hands were still shaking from the adrenaline, and the full magnitude of what he'd just done was beginning to sink in. He had run toward gunfire. He had left the safety of his hiding place to help two beings he barely knew. He had risked his own life and, by extension, his family's survival for strangers. But as he watched the veterinary team carefully load Thor into their emergency vehicle, as he saw the dog's eyes focus briefly on his face one last time with what looked unmistakably like gratitude, Marcus knew he had made the right choice. Sometimes being strong meant more than just surviving. Sometimes it meant being willing to risk everything to help others survive as well. The boy who had woken up that morning, worried about selling enough candy to buy his mother's medicine, had become something else entirely in the space of a few terrifying minutes. He had become the kind of person who ran toward danger instead of away from it, who put others' needs before his own safety, who answered the call of conscience even, when it came at great personal cost. As the ambulances pulled away with their precious cargo, Marcus Thompson stood alone in the alley, bloodied but unbowed, forever changed by the moment when he chose courage over safety, compassion over self-preservation. He had no idea that his actions would soon inspire an entire community, or that the bond he had forged with Thor in that moment of crisis would reshape both their destinies in ways he couldn't yet imagine. All he knew was that he had done the right thing, and sometimes that was enough. The controlled chaos of the emergency response unfolded around Marcus like a perfectly choreographed dance of professionals who had performed this routine countless times before, yet never quite under these circumstances. Within minutes of the first patrol car's arrival, the alley had transformed into a command center where paramedics, police officers, and veterinary emergency technicians worked in seamless coordination to save 2 lives. Marcus stood off to the side, still shirtless and covered in Thor's blood, watching as the lead paramedic, a woman with graying hair and kind eyes, knelt beside Officer Peterson, while simultaneously coordinating with the veterinary team attending to Thor. The efficiency was breathtaking, but what struck Marcus most was how the professionals treated both casualties with equal urgency and respect. "You're the boy who provided first aid?" Dr. Sarah Martinez approached Marcus, her veterinary emergency kit in one hand and genuine curiosity in her voice. She was younger than Marcus had expected, probably in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and scrubs that spoke of someone who spent more time saving animals than worrying about appearances. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied, his voice still shaky from adrenaline. I saw he was bleeding really bad, so I used my shirt to try to stop it." Dr. Martinez knelt beside Thor, carefully examining Marcus's makeshift bandaging, while her hands moved with practiced skill over the wounded dog. "Where did you learn to apply pressure like this? The placement is perfect, and you maintained consistent compression. This isn't amateur work." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I don't know. My mom's been sick for a while, and I guess I've picked up some things from taking care of her. Plus, I've seen people get hurt in the neighborhood before." The veterinarian's eyes met his with something approaching amazement. "Son, what you did here probably saved this dog's life. The pressure you applied kept him from bleeding out, and the way you positioned the bandage shows an intuitive understanding of anatomy that most adults don't possess." As Dr. Martinez and her team prepared to transport Thor to the animal hospital, Marcus felt a panic rise in his chest that had nothing to do with his own safety. "Can I come with him? Please? I know I'm not family or anything, but—" "Marcus, is it?" Dr. Martinez had obviously overheard his conversation with the 911 dispatcher. "I don't see any reason why you can't ride along, assuming your parents are okay with it." Marcus's throat tightened. Explaining his family situation to strangers never got easier. But something about Dr. Martinez's genuine concern made him want to be honest. "My mom's really sick, and it's just me taking care of her and my little sister. She'd want me to make sure Thor's okay." Dr. Martinez studied his face for a moment, and Marcus could see her processing not just his words, but the deeper implications. A 11-year-old boy covered in blood, alone at a crime scene, talking about taking care of his family. "Okay, Marcus. Thor seems to respond to your voice. Sometimes that can help during transport." The ride to the veterinary hospital was a blur of sirens, medical equipment, and Marcus's steady stream of whispered encouragement to Thor. The dog remained conscious but weak, his breathing shallow and rapid. Marcus held Thor's paw gently, feeling the large calloused pad that spoke of countless hours of training and duty. "You're going to be okay, boy," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible over the siren. "You're the toughest dog I've ever seen. You saved Officer Peterson's life, and now we're going to save yours." Thor's eyes, though clouded with pain and medication, seemed to focus on Marcus's face. The dog's tail gave the faintest twitch, not quite a wag, but an acknowledgement that he heard and understood that this young human was trying to help him. At Riverside Animal Emergency Hospital, the controlled chaos resumed as Thor was wheeled into the treatment area on a gurney designed specifically for large dogs. Marcus tried to follow, but a gentle hand on his shoulder stopped him. "I'm sorry, son, but you'll have to wait out here," said a nurse whose name tag read Patricia. "Only authorized personnel in the surgical area." Marcus felt his world tilt slightly. After everything that had happened, the idea of being separated from Thor felt like abandonment. "But he knows me. What if he wakes up and I'm not there?" Patricia's expression softened as she looked at this blood-covered boy who was clearly fighting back tears. "Tell you what, I'll make sure Dr. Martinez knows you're here, and if Thor wakes up asking for you, we'll find a way to let you see him. But right now, the best thing you can do for him is let the doctors work." The waiting room of the veterinary emergency hospital was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. Unlike human hospitals, with their sterile, clinical atmosphere, this place felt warmer somehow. The walls were painted in soft colors, and there were photos of happy, healthy animals everywhere. But despite the comforting decor, the underlying tension was the same. People worried about creatures they loved, hoping against hope for areas. He realized he was still shirtless and probably looked like a refugee from a disaster zone. But none of the staff seemed to care. A receptionist brought him a hospital gown to wear, and a volunteer offered him a warm blanket. For the first time since the shooting began, Marcus allowed himself to truly feel the weight of what had happened. His hands, now clean but still stained under the fingernails, shook as the adrenaline began to fade from his system. He found himself thinking about Emma, who would be getting home from school soon to find their apartment empty. He thought about his mother, who would worry when he didn't return with her evening medication. But mostly, he thought about Thor, about the magnificent dog's courage in protecting his partner, about the trust he'd seen in those intelligent brown eyes, about the responsibility he now felt to see this through to the end. As the minutes stretched into hours, Marcus closed his eyes and did something he hadn't done since his mother first got sick. He prayed. Not to the God of Sunday school lessons he barely remembered, but to whatever force in the universe might be listening to the desperate plea of an 11-year-old boy who had found something worth fighting for beyond his own survival. Please, he thought, let Thor be okay. He's a good dog. He protects people. The world needs more beings like him, not fewer. The first police officer to arrive at the hospital was Sergeant Mike Johnson, a 20-year veteran with kind eyes and a reputation for treating everyone, regardless of age or circumstances, with dignity and respect. Marcus looked up from his corner chair as the sergeant approached, noting the way the man's gaze took in every detail. The blood-stained hospital gown, the exhausted posture, the young face that carried far too much worry for someone who should be in 6th grade. You must be Marcus, Sergeant Johnson said, settling into the chair beside him without waiting for permission. I'm Mike Johnson. I work with Officer Peterson and Thor. Marcus straightened up, suddenly conscious of how he must appear to this professional law enforcement officer. Yes, sir. Is Officer Peterson okay? He's going to be fine. Concussion and some stitches, but nothing that won't heal. He's awake now and asking about Thor and about the young man who saved his partner's life. Sergeant Johnson's voice carried a note of something that might have been awe. The paramedics tell me you ran into an active shooting scene to help them. Thor was bleeding, Marcus said simply, as if that explained everything. Someone had to do something. Before Sergeant Johnson could respond, Dr. Martinez emerged from the treatment area, her scrubs now showing the evidence of emergency surgery.
My thought, the bullet nicked his femoral artery, which is why the bleeding was so severe. Without your immediate intervention, without the pressure you applied and maintained, this dog would have bled out in that alley long before we could get to him. Marcus felt his legs go weak, and Sergeant Johnson's steadying hand on his shoulder was the only thing that kept him upright. Is he going to be okay? We're not out of the woods yet, Dr. Martinez continued. He's in surgery now. We've managed to repair the arterial damage, but he's lost a significant amount of blood. The next few hours will be critical. His body needs time to stabilize, and there's always the risk of complications with trauma this severe. The words hit Marcus like physical blows. After everything, the terror in the alley, the desperate race to the hospital, the hours of waiting, Thor might still die.
The unfairness of it made his chest tight with rage and helplessness. "But," Dr. Martinez continued, and Marcus caught the subtle shift in her tone, "I want you to understand something, Marcus. What you did today was extraordinary. Your quick thinking, your proper application of pressure, your calm behavior under stress, all of that gave Thor a fighting chance he wouldn't have had otherwise. Whatever happens now, you've already proven yourself a hero." As Dr. Martinez returned to the surgical suite, Marcus sank back into his chair, emotionally drained, but unable to even consider leaving. Sergeant Johnson studied him with the practiced eye of someone who had spent 2 decades reading people in crisis situations. "When's the last time you ate something, son?" the sergeant asked gently. Marcus had to think about it. Breakfast seemed like a lifetime ago. "This morning, I think, before I went to sell candy." "Stay right here." Sergeant Johnson disappeared for several minutes, returning with a sandwich from the hospital's vending machine and a cup of coffee that smelled better than anything Marcus had encountered in months. "Hospital coffee's terrible, but it's warm, and it's got caffeine. You look like you could use both." As Marcus ate, Sergeant Johnson asked gentle questions about the shooting, about what Marcus had observed, about his decision to help. The boy found himself telling the story in detail, and with each word, he began to understand why he had felt so compelled to act. "Thor reminds me of myself, I guess," Marcus said, surprising himself with the honesty. "He takes care of others. He protects people who can't protect themselves. He doesn't give up, even when things get scary." Sergeant Johnson nodded thoughtfully. "And you feel like that's your job too? Taking care of others?" Marcus thought about Emma doing homework by flashlight, about his mother apologizing for being a burden, about the constant weight of responsibility that had become as familiar as "Your age," Sergeant Johnson observed. "But from what I've seen today, you've got the heart for it. The question is whether you've got the support you need." Other officers began arriving throughout the evening, men and women who worked with Peterson and Thor, who had heard about the street boy hero and wanted to see for themselves the child who had risked his life to save their canine partner. Each one brought the same mixture of gratitude and amazement, and slowly Marcus began to understand that his actions had rippled far beyond that alley. Officer Maria Santos arrived around 9 p.m., with a clean T-shirt in Marcus's size and a genuine smile that reminded him of his mother during her healthy days. "Heard you might need this," she said, handing him the shirt. "Can't have our hero sitting around in a hospital gown all night." As Marcus changed into the clean shirt, the first act of normal self-care he'd performed since the morning, he caught sight of himself in the bathroom mirror. His face was streaked with dried tears he didn't remember shedding, and his eyes held a look he'd never seen before. Older somehow, as if the events of the day had added years to his young face. But underneath the exhaustion and stress, he saw something else, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there that morning. He had faced a crisis and risen to meet it. He had made a choice that could have cost him everything, and he had done it without hesitation or regret. When he returned to the waiting room, Marcus found that word of his vigil had spread throughout the hospital. The volunteer staff had brought him a pillow and a proper blanket. Someone had left a book on the chair beside him, a young adult novel about courage and friendship that he tucked away to read to Emma later. Through it all, Marcus maintained his watch, checking the clock every few minutes, and listening for any sound from the surgical area that might give him news about Thor's condition. The dog had become more than just a patient to him. Thor represented something Marcus had been searching for without even knowing it, a symbol of what it meant to serve others, to put duty and protection above personal safety, to be the kind of being others could depend on when everything went wrong. At 2:47 a.m., Marcus pressed his face against the small window that looked into the surgical recovery area, watching Dr. Martinez and her team work over Thor's still form. The dog lay on his side, connected to more tubes and wires than Marcus had ever seen, his magnificent coat partially shaved to accommodate the surgical site and monitoring equipment. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor had become the soundtrack to Marcus's vigil, each electronic pulse proof that Thor was still fighting, still refusing to give up, despite the trauma his body had endured.
The table with quiet efficiency, checking readouts on various machines, adjusting IV drips, and occasionally placing her hand on Thor's chest to feel his breathing. Even through the window, Marcus could see the deep concentration on her face, the look of a professional who understood that the next few hours would determine whether all their efforts had been enough. "He's a fighter," said a soft voice behind Marcus. He turned to find Patricia, the nurse who had comforted him earlier, approaching with a fresh cup of coffee. "Dr. Martinez says his vital signs have been stable for the past 2 hours. That's a very good sign." Marcus accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping his hands around the warm cup, as much for comfort as for heat. "How much longer until we know?" "Surgery's been completed for about an hour now. It's really a matter of his body's ability to recover from the trauma and blood loss. Dogs are remarkably resilient, and German Shepherds especially so. Plus, he's young and was in excellent physical condition before this happened." Through the window, Marcus watched Thor's chest rise and fall with mechanical regularity, assisted by the ventilator that was helping him breathe, while his body focused on healing. If Thor survived, Marcus would dedicate his life to being worthy. At 3:15 a.m., Dr. Martinez finally emerged from the recovery area, pulling off her surgical gloves as she approached Marcus. Her face was exhausted, but carried something that made Marcus's heart leap with hope. "The surgery was successful," she said, and Marcus felt his knees buckle with relief. Sergeant Johnson, who had remained at the hospital throughout the night, despite Marcus's protests, caught the boy's arm and steadied him. "Thor's going to make it?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Barring any unforeseen complications, yes. We've repaired the arterial damage, replaced the blood he lost, and his vital signs have remained stable throughout the procedure. He's not out of the woods yet. The next 24 hours will be critical, but I'm cautiously optimistic." Marcus felt something crack open in his chest, a dam of emotion he'd been holding back since the moment he'd seen Thor collapse in the alley. Tears came in a flood he couldn't control, months of stored fear and responsibility, and desperate hope pouring out in great gulping sobs that shook his entire body. He hadn't cried when his mother first got sick, hadn't cried when they'd lost their apartment and had to move to the cramped space on Roosevelt Street, hadn't cried through any of the countless nights when he'd lain awake worrying about money and medicine and whether his family would survive another day. But Thor's survival broke something loose in him. Maybe relief, maybe gratitude, maybe just the simple human need to release the unbearable tension he'd been carrying. Sergeant Johnson's large hand rested on his shoulder, a steadying presence that let Marcus know it was okay to fall apart just for a moment. "He's going to be okay.
Marcus whispered between sobs, as much to himself as to anyone else. He's really going to be okay. Through his tears, Marcus saw Dr. Martinez watching him with an expression of deep compassion, mixed with professional curiosity. "Marcus," she said gently, "would you like to see him? Just for a minute?" Marcus wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and nodded, not trusting his voice. Dr. Martinez led him through a side door into the recovery area, where Thor lay surrounded by the quiet hum of medical equipment. The dog was unconscious, but breathing steadily on his own now, the ventilator having been removed during Marcus's emotional breakdown. His coat had been partially shaved and covered with bandages, but his face remained unmarked, still noble and intelligent, even in sleep. "You can touch him," Dr. Martinez said. "Sometimes patients respond to familiar voices and gentle contact, even under anesthesia." Marcus approached the table slowly, almost reverently, and placed his hand on Thor's head. The fur was still soft and warm, still unmistakably alive. "Hey, boy," he whispered. "You did good today. You saved Officer Peterson, and now you're going to get better and go back to protecting people. That's what heroes do. They rest, they heal, and then they get back to work." As if responding to Marcus's voice, Thor's eyes fluttered open briefly, unfocused but unmistakably aware. The dog's gaze found Marcus's face, and for just a moment there was recognition there, a connection that transcended species and circumstances. Thor's tail gave the faintest twitch against the examining table, and Marcus felt his heart swell with joy, so intense it was almost painful. "That's right, boy. You know me. I'm the kid who helped you in the alley. And I'm going to be here when you wake up properly, okay? I promise." Dr. Martinez gently guided Marcus back to the waiting room, but the boy felt transformed now, and he's going to be unconscious for several more hours while his body continues to heal. There's nothing more you can do here tonight. Marcus looked back toward the recovery area, reluctant to leave despite his exhaustion. What if he wakes up and I'm not here? What if something goes wrong? I promise you, if there's any change in his condition, good or bad, I'll call you immediately. Do you have a phone number where you can be reached? Marcus gave her his neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez's number, knowing that their own phone had been disconnected months ago. Can I come back tomorrow? First thing in the morning? Marcus, Dr. Martinez said with a smile that was both professional and genuinely warm. After what you did today, you're welcome here anytime. Thor's going to need all the friends he can get during his recovery, and something tells me you're going to be his most important visitor. As Sergeant Johnson drove Marcus home through the quiet pre-dawn streets, the boy stared out the window at a city that looked different somehow, not because anything had physically changed, but because Marcus himself had been transformed. He was no longer just a kid trying to survive from day to day. He was someone who had made a difference, someone who had saved a life, someone who had proven that heroes could emerge from the most unexpected places. The familiar streets of his neighborhood came into view, and Marcus felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and excitement. Emma would be waking up soon, worried about where he'd been all night. His mother would need her morning medication. The routine demands of survival would resume, just as they had every day for the past 8 months. But something fundamental had changed in Marcus Thompson during those long hours in the hospital waiting room. He had found his calling, his purpose, his reason for being more than just another casualty of circumstances beyond his control. As Thor fought for his life in the recovery room of Riverside Animal Emergency Hospital, Marcus made a silent promise that would guide the rest of his days. He would become the kind of person Thor had shown him it was possible to be: brave, loyal, protective, and completely dedicated to serving others. The sun was beginning to rise over the city as Sergeant Johnson's patrol car pulled up to Marcus's apartment building, painting the sky in shades of hope and new beginnings. Gunfire found Peterson unconscious, and Thor, bleeding out, applied textbook pressure to the wound and called 911 with calm precision. He rode with Thor to the veterinary hospital and refused to leave his side all night. Peterson, ignoring medical advice, signed himself out and went straight to Riverside Animal Emergency Hospital. Dr. Martinez confirmed Thor had nearly died, his femoral artery nicked, blood loss critical, but Marcus's quick aid had saved him. Through a window, Peterson saw the boy curled up in a chair beside Thor's recovery cage, exhausted but watchful. His clothes were patched, sneakers worn through, but his posture radiated quiet responsibility. Dr. Martinez explained Marcus had refused food, a ride, or a real bed, saying only that he'd promised Thor he'd be there when the dog woke up. When Marcus awoke and saw Peterson, his first question was, "Are you okay?" The boy was small, underfed, but his intelligent brown eyes held no fear, only concern. Peterson thanked him. "You saved my partner. You saved my best friend." Marcus shrugged it off. "Thor's a hero. I couldn't let him die. If he could be that brave, maybe I could too." Peterson noticed the boy's maturity, the careful way he spoke, and the hints of hardship he tried to hide. Offering him a ride home, Peterson sensed Marcus was guarding his family's privacy. Thor's soft whimper interrupted them, his eyes opening, tail wagging weakly. When Thor saw Marcus, he perked up, greeting him with clear recognition. "He remembers you," Peterson said. Marcus stroked his muzzle. "We both know what it's like to take care of someone else." Before leaving, Peterson promised Marcus he could visit Thor any time. Driving Marcus home revealed a worn but tight-knit neighborhood. Old brick buildings with small gardens and children's drawings in the windows. Marcus's apartment was modest, but spotless, filled with signs of care. His younger sister Emma ran to him in relief. Peterson saw immediately that Marcus was more than a brother. He was her protector. Inside, Peterson met their mother, Sarah Thompson, bedridden by illness. Despite her frailty, she radiated dignity. Listening to Marcus recount the alley, Sarah's pride warred with fear. "You could have been killed." Marcus simply said, "Sometimes you have to do the right thing, even when it's scary." In that small room, Peterson understood. Marcus was holding his family together, working, cooking, helping Emma with school, sacrificing his childhood without complaint. Peterson stayed an hour, quietly noting how Marcus rationed food, how Emma leaned on him, how love filled the apartment. He would rally the community to support the boy who had risked his life for his partner. Because sometimes the most important partnerships don't start in training. They start in an alley, under fire, with a choice. And Marcus Thompson had already proved he was exactly the kind of hero worth protecting. Peterson walked into the 15th precinct the next morning with a white bandage stitched across his hairline, and doctor's orders to keep things light for a week. The precinct's familiar noise, radio chatter, ringing phones, the steady percussion of a city's heartbeat felt newly significant. Everything felt different since yesterday's alley. Since the image of a thin 11-year-old kneeling in blood to save a police dog. "Peterson," the desk sergeant called, relief breaking the gravel of his voice. "How's the head?" "Still attached," Peterson said, moving toward the break room where half the shift gathered for morning brief, which is more than it might have been without a certain 11-year-old hero. Inside, Sergeant Robert Williams, 2 decades on, all gravel and gravitas, stood to meet him with a careful hand on the shoulder. "Heard you and Thor had a day," he said. "How's the dog?" "Alive because a kid ran toward gunfire," Peterson answered, feeling the whole room lean in. "I need to tell you about Marcus Thompson and why his family needs us." He gave them the alley in spare, clean lines, the ambush, Thor's leap into the shot, the brick, the blackout. Then the impossible, a boy selling candy on the corner who sprinted toward gunfire, knelt in glass and grit, pressed perfect pressure to ephemeral nick, called 911 with a calm that shamed most adults, rode in the ambulance, and kept vigil all night at Riverside Animal Emergency. He told them about the ride home later, the patched clothes, taped sneakers, the third-floor walk-up with dignity in every swept corner. About Sarah Thompson, early 30s, and weighed down by illness and medication. About Emma, 7, bright-eyed and quake-nervous, until she folded into her brother's arms. About a child who had been quietly raising his family. An 11-year-old ran into active gunfire, Officer Jackson asked, disbelief roughening his tone. Not just ran, Peterson said. He rendered aid like he'd been trained. He refused to leave Thor's side. He's been paying for his mom's meds by selling candy. He's been choosing between dinner and prescriptions so his little sister can eat. Silence swept the room. The kind of silence that happens when professionals who think they've seen it all realize they haven't. Officer Kim, new to Williams, stepped to the window, stared at the street, and turned back with eyes he rarely let anyone see. 20 years I've seen heroes, he said thickly. Officers, civilians, people calling 911 when it mattered. But an 11-year-old carrying a family and running toward gunfire to save a police dog? That's beyond ordinary heroism. Jackson was already reaching for his phone. We organize a fundraiser today. Not just money, Kim added. School enrollment, tutoring, mom's medical care. This is bigger than our precinct, Peterson said, a steady heat spreading under his sternum. People need to hear what real courage looks like. Williams nodded, command instinct snapping into place. Jackson, call Channel 7. Ask for Maria Santos. She does those human interest pieces right. Kim, hit local businesses, community groups. Rodriguez, loop the school district on immediate enrollment and support. I've got a line on a surgeon. And Thor? Rodriguez asked from the doorway. How's he taking all this? Peterson's first real smile since the alley cut a line through the bandages. He's bonded to Marcus like he's a pack. I've never seen him take to someone outside the Handler family like this. Ideas became assignments. The break room morphed into an impromptu command center. Media calls, donation spreadsheets, school contacts, medical lists. As the planning wound down, Williams glanced at the whiteboard and grinned. "We call it Thor's Heroes," he said. "That dog brought the hero out in a boy. Now the boy's story brings it out in us." When Williams called, she felt the instinctive snap of attention. A child, a dog, a city. She scheduled the interview for the next afternoon at Riverside Animal Emergency and came early, wanting to observe off-camera. What she found: a boy in a too-big borrowed hoodie, reading a library book aloud to a German shepherd with shaved flank and bright, uncomplaining eyes. Marcus paused when Thor shifted, reassured him with a palm to the muzzle, then read on. The dog watched him with an attention reserved for Pack. "Marcus," Maria said quietly. "I'm Maria Santos, Channel 7. Officer Peterson arranged for us to talk. I don't know if there's much to talk about," he said, standing out of habit. "Thor's the hero," what he felt. "I watched Thor jump in front of that gunman," Marcus said. "If a dog could be that brave, how could I be less brave? Sometimes doing the right thing is scary, but you still have to do it." She asked about his family, gently. He spoke about Emma and Sarah without self-pity, naming facts the way some people recite prayers. Selling candy, buying medication, helping with homework, keeping the lights on. When Maria called his sacrifices remarkable, Marcus shook his head. "I just did what anyone would do." Thor lifted his head and pressed his nose into the boy's hand. 3 days later, the segment aired. Channel 7's lines lit up before the credits finished. By midnight, the clip, "11-year-old street vendor saves police dog's life," was everywhere. Comments piled like snowdrifts, amazement at courage, fury at circumstance, the sudden electric desire to help. Within 24 hours, national outlets were calling the precinct. Within 48, packages began arriving. Money, food, med supplies, notes from families who saw themselves in the Thompsons. Henderson's Hardware offered Sarah a flexible schedule job when she recovered. "Any woman who raised a son like that," the manager said, "is exactly who we want." Riverside Elementary offered immediate enrollment for both children, tutoring to close the gaps, and a school counselor on call. Dr. Patricia Hoffman, a pediatric specialist, phoned Sergeant Williams directly to offer free ongoing health care for Marcus and Emma. "He saved a life," she said. "Least I can do is protect his." Marcus tried to absorb it as Peterson brought stacks of letters to Thor's cage. A family in Oregon sent paperbacks with a note from their son. "These are my favorites. Maybe you and Thor will like them too." A veterans group in Texas donated toward Sarah's surgery with a line that made Peterson swallow hard. "Heroes take care of heroes, regardless of age." Children wrote by the dozens, describing babysitting siblings, checking neighbors' mail, making sandwiches for classmates who never had lunch. "You started something," Maria told him in a follow-up. Marcus thought for a moment. Maybe the best part is other kids realizing they can help people too. The fundraiser, Thor's Heroes, launched on a crisp Saturday in November, exactly 1 week after the alley. The gym at Roosevelt Elementary turned into a command post of compassion. Tables of baked goods and raffle baskets, booths from local businesses, sign-up sheets for meal trains and tutoring. The morning trickle became a noon surge. By early afternoon, people spilled into hallways and the small courtyard under string lights. Marcus stood by a banner that read, "Thor's Heroes, celebrating courage."
Thor accepted their hands like benedictions.
"I can't believe they all came for us," Marcus whispered. They came for what your story reminded them about themselves, Peterson said. Sometimes people need to see courage to remember they still have it. Hourly totals rolled like thunder. At 2 p.m., 15,000. At 4, 22. At 6, Sergeant Williams took the mic, voice booming across the packed gym. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks to your generosity, Thor's Heroes has raised $25,437. The cheer rattled the rafters. Marcus's knees went soft. 25,000 was surgery and rent and time to breathe. Dr. Hoffman reached him with tears shining. Your mother can schedule surgery immediately, she said. Between donations and medical supplies, she has everything she needs. The offers kept stacking. Local grocers built a rotating calendar of weekly food packages. Springfield Apartments, a safe, well-kept complex, offered a 2-bedroom at reduced rent, the deposit waived. A retired math teacher volunteered to tutor Marcus 4 afternoons a week. A reading specialist offered Emma an hour a day until she felt steady. People came in waves to shake Marcus's hand and tell him what he'd shifted in their homes. A teenager named Jake said, I saw your interview and realized I've been whining about chores while you're taking care of your whole family. I signed up at the animal shelter. Mrs. Patterson, an elderly widow, pressed a wrinkled 20 into his palm. My grandson is your age, she said. He saw you and now carries my groceries every week. A cluster of elementary kids brought a Ziploc bag of coins and crumpled dollars, $127, and a construction paper card signed with block letters and glitter. If an 11-year-old can be a hero, their teacher said, so can we. At 7, the formal ceremony began. Thor sat beside Marcus on the small stage, posture perfect despite his healing wound, eyes sweeping the faces. When they introduced Marcus, the applause rose and kept rising, 5 minutes of people refusing to stop admiring what they wished to be. I don't really know what to say, Marcus began, voice steady through the sound system. When I saw Thor bleeding in that alley, I didn't think about being brave. I thought about how he'd just protected Officer Peterson and how I couldn't let someone that brave die if there was anything I could do. He looked down, Thor's ears tilted toward him. But this isn't about me. It's about all the kids who take care of their families every day, who make sacrifices nobody sees, who find ways to be brave even when they're scared. The gym went very still. There are kids in every neighborhood who tutor their brothers and sisters, who work after school to help pay rent. 2. He took a breath. So this honor isn't just mine. It belongs to every kid who had to grow up too fast, to anyone who helped when helping was hard, to every family that takes care of each other, no matter what. Thank you for helping my family and for proving communities can take care of each other. The standing ovation lasted nearly 10 minutes. Thor rose, pressed his head into Marcus's hand, tail wagging a small solemn rhythm like pride itself had learned restraint. Later, when the crowd thinned and the gym's echoes softened, Marcus sat on the edge of the stage with Thor's head warm against his leg. Around them, boxes of groceries, envelopes thick with checks, cards, and letters addressed in every kind of hand. Evidence of a city remembering how to be a village. We did it, Thor, Marcus whispered, scratching behind a familiar ear. Your story and mine. They're going to change everything for my family. Thor answered by leaning harder, a weight of trust and belonging that said what words couldn't. They had saved each other in the alley. Now together, they were saving more. The boy who, a week earlier, had worried about selling enough candy to buy his mother's medicine was surrounded by proof that heroes emerge from unexpected places. and that sometimes the smallest, scariest choices, running toward instead of away, can change the shape of a whole community, and just maybe its future. 6 weeks after the shooting that rerouted their lives, Marcus Thompson had a new role: physical therapy shadow for a police dog who'd become family. Riverside Animal Emergency's rehab wing looked like a miniature training ground. Underwater treadmill, balance beams, low hurdles, retooled for a working dog rebuilding himself, one careful movement at a time. "Easy steps now," Marcus murmured, voice steady with the quiet authority he'd forged in hospital nights. "We're building strength, not rushing back to work." Thor, massive, scarred, alert, moved across the balance beam, compensating for residual weakness with deliberate control. Dr. Martinez watched, clipboard hanging at her side, fascinated not by muscles knitting, but by the psychology unfurling in front of her. The restlessness and frustration she expected in convalescing canines evaporated whenever Marcus took the lead. Where other dogs paced, Thor focused. Where others bristled, he breathed. "Marcus," she called during a water break. "A word?" He settled Thor on a mat. The dog exhaled and immediately relaxed, eyes flicking between them. "In 15 years, Martinez said, "I've never seen this. Working dogs hate downtime. It can turn them depressed or aggressive. Thor's thriving because of you. He just needs to know someone cares about him getting better," Marcus said. "Have you considered you might have a gift with animals?" The idea startled him. He'd learned Thor's micro-signals by necessity, twitches that meant fatigue, ear angles that meant frustration, the quiet stillness that meant ready for more. But he hadn't named it a gift. He'd just kept showing up. Peterson appeared in the doorway during a coordination drill and leaned there unseen as Thor followed the boy with the precision he used to save for patrol. "Down," Marcus said. Thor dropped. "Stay." Marcus crossed the room. Thor didn't flinch. "Okay, come." A smooth trot, a wag like a smile. "You've got a gift, son," Peterson said finally. "He responds to you almost as well as he does to me, and he's been my partner 6 years. Marcus flushed, keeping his focus on Thor. "He's happy to work again, even if it's different work. Dogs need purpose, don't they? Especially dogs like Thor." As weeks stacked, Marcus's role deepened. He learned to cut a session short at the first whisper of fatigue, to push when Thor wanted challenge, to back off when pride masked frustration. Thor's personality brightened with his strength. Protectiveness extended from Peterson to the boy. Visitors found a shepherd subtly positioning himself between them and Marcus, guarding, not warning. With rehab-safe toys, Thor learned gentle tug, eyes bright, tail restrained, but hopeful. "He's different with you," Peterson said one afternoon as Thor flowed through a complex movement chain. "More relaxed, like he knows he doesn't have to be on duty every second. Maybe because I need him to be okay, more than I need him to be perfect," Marcus answered, scratching behind an ear. "When you're scared someone might die, you just want them happy and healthy. Everything else is extra." He'd turned 12 during those sessions. Cake on paper plates in a fluorescent room, Thor's head on his knee. Maturity kept arriving without asking permission. As Thor neared full strength, his drive to return to work glowed through every movement. But in the quiet between drills, he rested his head in Marcus's lap and just was. "He wants to go back," Marcus told Martinez during a check-in, "but he's also happy when he feels safe. Maybe healing isn't just getting your body back, it's feeling like yourself again." The Thompsons were healing too, complicated, messy, miraculous. 2 months after the shooting, Sarah Thompson went into surgery on a bright Tuesday. Marcus sat with Emma and Peterson in the waiting room, fingers laced so tightly his knuckles blanched. For once, he didn't carry the fear alone. 4 hours later, Dr. Patricia Hoffman came out with an answer that sounded like sunlight. The tumor was gone. Prognosis, excellent. With rest and follow-ups, Sarah could be fully herself in months. "Your mother's going to be fine," Hoffman told him, taking the seat beside him as if she understood. They were words that needed to land slowly. Tears reached Marcus before he realized they'd started. A year of watching his mother fade had trained him to swallow grief. Relief broke that training. Emma wrapped him in a hug that trembled with new permission to hope. Peterson looked away and blinked, because some moments were too sacred to narrate. The new apartment at Springfield felt like a palace. 2 real bedrooms, a working stove, reliable heat. Windows overlooking a small playground. Marcus stood in his room, the first door he'd been able to close in a year, and tried out the luxury of thinking without listening for Emma, of reading without calculating pill bottles. "It's really ours?" Emma asked for the 10th time. "It's really ours," he said, learning how joy felt when it wasn't rationed. With rent stable and groceries on a schedule thanks to the community, school became possible. Roosevelt Elementary greeted Marcus as both celebrity and project, then quickly realized he was something else entirely. Months of budgeting had turned math into muscle memory. Long nights of reading to comfort his family had honed comprehension. Writing came out clear and older than his age. Emma flourished too. Food colored her cheeks. Safety softened her eyes. She made friends. She laughed without checking the door. Thursday dinners turned their apartment into a small outpost of the precinct's heart. Peterson came by with officers who'd helped, and Sarah, strength inching back, insisted on cooking. "Everything is different," she told Peterson one evening, as Marcus helped Emma with fractions, while Thor sprawled across both their feet. "He grew up too fast. I let him carry too much." "Maybe," Peterson said. "Maybe that's why he had the courage to save Thor. Because love taught him what to do when it's hard." He glanced up as Marcus looked over, and offered Sarah a smile that was finally, fully, a child's. "He gets to be a kid now," Peterson added softly. "He won't lose who he is." Thor's approved visits became part of recovery, socialization for the dog, celebration for the family. He performed a few gentle rehab tricks for Emma, tail wagging, while Marcus coached like a trainer who understood joy was as therapeutic as any protocol. Before Peterson left one night, Sarah pulled him aside. "We can't repay any of this," she said. "But I want you to know Marcus talks about becoming a police officer. You and Thor gave him a dream." "Something tells me the department will be lucky to have him," Peterson said. Spring came early and took Marcus with it. Teachers who'd worried about remediation found themselves sprinting to keep up. Mrs. Henderson, his 6th grade teacher, called Peterson. "In 3 months, he's not just caught up, way veteran teachers do when experience turns knowledge into instinct." Doors Marcus hadn't known existed swung open. Counselors talked advanced placement. Colleges sniffed the air, but his compass was already set. "I want to shadow you and Thor," he told Peterson, after a session where Thor, now cleared for light duty, moved like a promise. Peterson had expected it. "Community visits only," he said. "No danger." Marcus nodded. "I want to learn the parts that help people." Their first stop, Riverside Elementary Kindergarten. Marcus rode shotgun with a junior volunteer badge Sergeant Williams had minted special. In the classroom, he translated big ideas into 5-year-old. "Thor is a working dog. He helps keep our community safe. He also loves to play, like your pets." Thor sat, stayed, waved a paw, security wrapped in fur, while 20 small faces learned what service looked like up close. Afterward, Marcus asked Mrs. Patterson, "Can I come back and read? Books about courage and helping? Thor can listen with us." Within weeks, Marcus and Thor's story time anchored 3 schools. The boy who'd read to calm a wounded dog now read to build small citizens, threading concepts of bravery, kindness, and community into stories that landed like seeds. "He's a natural teacher," said Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the principal, after watching Marcus work a room of first graders. "Have you talked to him about education?" But Marcus's questions, in Peterson's cruiser between visits, kept circling canine operations, training pipelines, procedures, the symbiosis of handler and dog. "How long to become a canine handler?" he asked one afternoon, after Thor finished demonstrating scent work for middle schoolers. "College, academy, then specialized certification," Peterson said. "It's a long path. You'd be good at it." That night, at his desk, his room, Marcus wrote an English assignment meant to be a paragraph and made it a declaration. "Thor saved my life by showing me what I want to become," he wrote. "Not just a police officer, but someone who protects others the way Thor protected Officer Peterson. I want to work with dogs trained to help people and be the kind of person kids can trust." He paused, thought of kindergartners leaning in, of Emma sleeping without nightmares, of his mother's laugh returning. Then he finished. "I learned heroes aren't people who aren't scared. Heroes are people who do the right thing even when they are scared, who take care of others when it's hard, who never give up on the people they love. Thor showed me that kind of courage. I want to spend my life showing it to others." Mrs. Henderson read it and called Peterson. "This isn't a career plan," she said. Future days. He'd seen bravery expressed as instinct in a dog. He'd seen it chosen again and again in a boy. Now he watched it mature into purpose. The kid who once sold candy to keep his family alive had built a new economy for his life of service, of trust, of doing the hard right thing because it was right. Thor shifted, sighed, and let his weight sink against Peterson's boot the way he did when something was settled. Out the window, spring kept its promise. Inside, a path did the same. Marcus Thompson wasn't just recovering from a crisis. He was becoming what the crisis had revealed, someone who would stand where it was scary, speak when it mattered, and make sure others didn't have to face the worst alone. If anyone asked where it started, Peterson knew the answer. With a dog who leapt, a boy who ran toward, and a city that remembered how to be a village. The rest, rehab rooms and study groups and story times, was the life you build when courage finds its calling and refuses to let go. The morning of Thor's return to duty broke crisp and bright, the kind of light that seemed to promise new chapters. After 4 months of rehabilitation, the German Shepherd was cleared for light patrol, and Peterson made sure Marcus was there. The boy who had saved Thor's life would see him step back into the work he loved. At the police training facility, officers, vets, and local media gathered, cameras ready. The community had followed Thor's recovery like a serial, and today was the finale. Marcus stood beside Peterson at the edge of the field, hands clasped, eyes sharp. Thor looked magnificent, coat glossy, posture proud, but Marcus saw what others missed. "He's nervous," he murmured. A slight shoulder tightness, ears swiveling toward harmless sounds, signs of old wounds, not physical, but in memory. Peterson followed his gaze. He saw it too. The first test was a familiar obstacle course. Thor launched forward at Peterson's command, steady until a section with simulated gunfire. The crack of blanks stopped him cold, frozen mid-step, trembling. He'd run this course hundreds of times. Now the sound connected to the alley, the pain, the blood. Post-traumatic stress in working dogs was rare, but serious. If it stuck, it could end his career. Marcus didn't wait for clearance. He walked onto the field, ignoring the cameras. "Hey, Thor," he said softly, kneeling. "Remember therapy? When you get scared, you don't have to hide it. You just remember you're brave enough to keep going." His hand rested on Thor's shoulder, feeling tension bleed away. "You're still a hero," he whispered. "That day in the alley, you knew you might get hurt, but you jumped anyway. Courage isn't not being scared. It's doing what's right, even when you are." Thor's ears tipped forward. "And I'm watching. You're not alone." Thor's tail gave a tentative wag. He nuzzled Marcus's hand, trusting. Marcus stepped back. This time, when Peterson gave the command, Thor ran the course. The blanks made him flinch, but he didn't stop. "Good boy, Thor," Marcus called as the shepherd cleared the final hurdle. The media got their story. Dr. Martinez got something better, an education. "Marcus, what you just did, reading his state, easing him through, that's advanced psychology. Many pros couldn't do it as well." Marcus shrugged, eyes on Thor. He just needed to remember that being brave doesn't mean you're never scared. Over the following weeks, Marcus became Thor's unofficial therapy companion during retraining. The department formalized it with a volunteer role. Peterson watched, amazed as the boy adapted drills, anticipated Thor's moods, and returned joy to the dog's work. "You've given him more than his confidence," Peterson told him one afternoon. "You've given him back his purpose, and I think you found yours too." By spring, Marcus, now in 7th grade, wasn't just keeping up in school. He was ahead. Straight A's, student government, peer tutoring, and volunteer work at the precinct. His teachers saw he was brilliant, but also that his brilliance had direction. It lifted others. Mrs. Rodriguez, his math teacher, offered accelerated placement. Marcus shook his head. "I'd rather help kids struggling with regular math. I can take harder classes later. Right now, I can make more of a difference helping them." He recognized something in classmates like Jason Martinez, a quiet 8th grader caring for younger siblings while parents worked nights. "I know what that's like," Marcus said during tutoring. "When my mom was sick, I stayed up worrying about bills. I fell asleep in class too." That honesty broke through Jason's walls. Marcus's success as an informal mentor led to a proposal, the Safety First program. Working with guidance counselor Mrs. Patterson, he taught younger kids emergency response, first aid, and how to call 911. Thor became part of the lessons, showing how animals and people could work together to help. Principal Dr. Mitchell was struck. "He doesn't just teach," she told Peterson. "He makes them believe they can act." On Saturdays, Marcus returned to his old candy-selling corner, not to work, but to check on kids like Tony Rivera, age 10. "Did you really save a police dog?" Tony asked. "I helped when he was hurt," Marcus said. "More importantly, how's your family?" He connected families in trouble with social workers, doctors, and community aid. When offered early college programs, Marcus weighed them against his community commitments. "Education should make me better at helping, not separate me from the people I want to serve." His perspective caught attention. Colleges called. Academy offered a future fast track. But Marcus kept his focus. "I want to be a canine officer. I want programs that help me serve best." Sergeant Williams, watching from the sidelines, summed it up. "That boy knows how to connect with people. It took me 20 years to learn that." At his first community safety meeting, Marcus skipped the scripted speech. He opened the floor. "Why should we trust police?" Mrs. Johnson asked, weary from years of disappointment. That's fair, Marcus said. Trust is earned through actions. Officers like Peterson risk themselves every day, but departments need to listen when you say something's wrong. Thor's presence made him approachable. Kids came for the dog, stayed for the conversation. Soon Marcus was speaking in schools, churches, and rec centers. Petty crime dropped in areas he visited. Residents called in suspicious activity more often. With Peterson at community leaders, he launched the Community Heroes Fund to help families in crisis. In year one, it raised $50,000. Sometimes people just need to know their community cares, Marcus said. Recognition followed. The elementary school where he once sold candy named a service program after him, the Marcus Thompson Young Heroes Initiative. Heroism isn't about being the biggest or strongest, Dr. Mitchell told the crowd. It's about courage, wisdom, and determination. Williams leaned toward Peterson. He's going to change the world. As high school neared, Marcus's reach grew. Teens volunteered after hearing him speak. Families discussed community issues around dinner tables. Struggling kids sought him out. The best part, Marcus told Peterson, is seeing others realize they can help too. Thor, now fully active, stayed by his side at events. Together they were a living emblem of courage and compassion. Proof that a boy who once sold candy to survive and a dog who'd been shot in the line of duty could not only recover but transform an entire community. When the police department formally added Marcus Thompson to its youth mentorship program, it wasn't just a title, it was a turning point. At 14, he was the youngest ever accepted. Chief Rodriguez made the exception after seeing the boy's track record, saving Thor's life, supporting his family through crisis, and inspiring an entire community. This isn't just learning police procedures, Peterson told him on his first official weekend as a mentee, parked outside the academy. It's about knowing if this calling is really right for you. Marcus looked out at the cadets on the training field. Ever since Thor got shot, I can't imagine doing anything else. Weekend sessions mixed classroom work, criminal justice theory, constitutional law, with field exercises. Marcus soaked it in. His streetwise background gave him insights even veterans lacked. His empathy let him enforcement. Scenario? Peterson said one afternoon. Domestic disturbance, the husband's gone. Wife's afraid he'll come back. What do? Marcus thought. First, make sure they're safe now. Then connect her with help, shelters, social services, and follow up so it doesn't escalate. Peterson nodded. That's community policing. It's not just stopping crime, it's stopping the next call. Thor remained central to Marcus's learning. Their bond had grown from gratitude to a near-professional partnership. The shepherd responded to Marcus's cues almost as readily as Peterson's. In training, Thor seemed to teach, showing him how posture and ear position signaled detection, how proximity shifted with threat levels. You see how his ears are forward but focused? Marcus noted during a warehouse exercise. He's onto something. Exactly, Peterson said. Most handlers take months to read that. Marcus's aptitude extended beyond drills. On community visits, he diffused tension by listening before judging. At a shopkeeper-teen standoff, he eased hostility into dialogue. I remember what it felt like when adults saw me as a problem, he told Peterson. Sometimes people just need to feel heard. By the program's first anniversary, Peterson saw a rare mix. Keen observation, calm under pressure, and service as motivation, not ego. The Thompson family's second Springfield Christmas felt like proof of survival. Sarah was healthy, working as a nurse's aide. Emma, 9, was thriving in school, her art talent encouraged by donated supplies. She presented Thor with a painted portrait. He sniffed it, tail wagging, and nuzzled her hand. Peterson's gifts were personal. A scarf and nursing book for Sarah, a professional art set for Emma, and for Marcus, a gleaming mountain bike. The boy stared, hands on the frame. For years, he'd watched other kids ride to school or to friends' houses while he worked corners for survival. "Now you can ride like any other kid," Peterson said. Marcus's voice caught. "I never thought. I imagined, but—" That night he circled the parking lot. Thor running alongside, Emma cheering from the balcony. Thursday game nights had become a tradition, with Thor patrolling between Marcus and Emma's chairs. "He's part of the family," Marcus said, scratching behind his ears. "He has been since the day he got shot protecting you." Sarah pulled Peterson aside after one of these nights. "We're living now, not just surviving. Marcus gets to be a teenager. Emma gets to be a little girl." Peterson nodded. "He's still a protector, but now he's protecting their future." On Marcus's 15th birthday, his room looked like a career planning on criminal justice with K-9 focus. Police academy, K-9 handler, community policing. "You're approaching this like you approached survival," Peterson said, scanning the charts. "Just remember, plans can evolve." "I know," Marcus said, "but I want to be the kind of officer kids like Emma can trust." Peterson made sure Marcus saw the reality too. The danger, scrutiny, split-second decisions. It means seeing the worst and still believing in the best. "I've seen both," Marcus replied. "I know one person can make a difference." Wanting to serve everyone in his community, Marcus began studying Spanish and American Sign Language. His Spanish teacher, Mrs. Valdez, noted, "He's learning it to help families, not just pass a class." ASL came after he watched police struggle to communicate with a deaf witness. "If I can't talk to them," he told Peterson, "how can I protect them?" Thor seemed to sense Marcus's trajectory, responding to his commands with the precision he reserved for Peterson. "It's like he knows you'll be a handler someday," Peterson said. Marcus knelt beside him. "Maybe not Thor. He'll retire first. But a dog like him. He taught me the best partnerships are built on trust." Through high school, Marcus chose tough courses, leadership activities, and steady community service. His counselor called it the most focused career planning I've seen in 20 years. By junior year, Marcus's role with Thor was less rescuer-rescued and more peer partner. Together they ran demos for school children. "I want to be the officer who makes families feel safe just by showing up," Marcus told Peterson. "The way Thor makes people feel." Peterson knew this was the kind of cop the badge needed. Courage forged in real struggle, compassion rooted in lived experience, and a commitment to service that came from understanding its impact firsthand. The morning sun bathed Roosevelt High School's football stadium in gold as hundreds of chairs awaited the class of 2028. Inside the main hallway, Marcus Thompson adjusted his valedictorian medallion, his hands trembling. Not from nerves, but from the weight of a journey that had once seemed impossible. At 18, he had transformed from the boy selling candy on street corners into the top student of his class. A 4.0 GPA, leadership roles, community service, and 4 years in the police department's youth mentorship program. His full scholarship to State University covered tuition, housing, and books. More than financial freedom, it symbolized recognition of his relentless effort and service. "Marcus, you ready?" asked Miss Patterson, his guidance counselor, handing him the speech he had refined for weeks. He glanced through the stadium windows, spotting the row reserved for police officers who had walked his path with him. Reporters clustered nearby. Marcus was used to the attention. His story had become of other kids facing uphill battles. Maria Santos, now a primetime anchor, summed it up for viewers. Marcus Thompson's journey proves that community support, personal determination, and unexpected heroes can create remarkable transformation. His speech centered on lessons from Thor, the police dog whose rescue had changed his life, loyalty to those who depend on you, perseverance in impossible odds, and the courage to act despite fear. Principal Dr. Mitchell's opening words echoed the same theme. Today we celebrate not just academic achievement, but the extraordinary potential that emerges when young people are supported by caring communities. In the front row sat Thor, dignified at 8 years old, wearing a ceremonial vest embroidered Marcus's hero. Peterson was beside him, in full dress uniform, pride written across his face. The entire department had come in uniform, treating this as their celebration too. Introduced as valedictorian, Marcus walked to the podium, feeling the gravity of representing something bigger than himself. Fellow graduates, families, and community members, he began, his voice steady. Today marks the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, not just for us, but for the communities we will serve. He spoke candidly of his past. 4 years ago, I was a freshman who'd spent the previous year selling candy to keep my family alive. I learned real courage from a dog named Thor and the officer who trusted me enough to help save him. Heroism isn't about being fearless. It's about acting when action is needed, even when you're terrified. Thor's ears perked, tail wagging, drawing warm laughter. Marcus pressed on, crediting Thor with teaching loyalty and Peterson with showing true service. Today, I can announce I'll attend State University to study criminal justice, aiming to become a K-9 officer. The stadium erupted in a standing ovation, starting with the police section and swelling to the entire crowd. Marcus closed with gratitude for his mother's resilience, his sister's spirit, and every person who had chosen to help a family they barely knew. When his name was called for his diploma, Thor stood, earning another round of applause. Afterward, Marcus knelt beside him. "Everything I've accomplished started with your courage in that alley," he whispered. A photographer captured the moment, the young graduate embracing the dog who had inspired his transformation. The next day's headline read, "Street Boy Turned Scholar." That evening, their apartment was alive with celebration. Officers, teachers, neighbors, all gathered to honor not just Marcus, but the shared effort that had shaped his success. Sarah, now advancing toward her RN license, confided to Peterson, "4 years ago, I thought my kids would end up in foster care. Now Marcus is heading to college, and Emma's thriving." Marcus spoke with Chief Rodriguez program. "Only 5 students a year," Rodriguez said. "Based on your record with Thor, you're exactly who they want." Across the room, Thor entertained Emma and other children, showing flecks of gray around his muzzle. Marcus murmured to Peterson, "He'll probably retire before I graduate." Peterson nodded. "Then you'll start fresh with another partner. But Thor's lessons will stay with you." Dr. Martinez arrived with a gift, a photo of Marcus beside Thor's recovery cage years ago. Engraved, "Heroes are made in moments of crisis," and sustained by years of dedication. "You saved his life," she said, "but I think he saved yours too." Later, on the balcony overlooking city lights, Peterson told Marcus, "I'm proud success hasn't changed you. You're still the kid who gave away candy to hungry kids, who kept a promise to a wounded dog, who uses his spotlight to honor others." "Thor taught me heroism isn't about recognition," Marcus replied, stroking the shepherd's head. "It's about doing what needs to be done, whether anyone notices or not." They stood in silence for a moment, the city spread below. Somewhere out there were kids who needed hope, families who needed protection. In 4 years, Marcus would return as Officer Thompson, ready to serve with the same loyalty Thor had shown and the same courage forged in crisis. The boy who once sold candy to survive was now a young man, determined to ensure others never faced their battles alone. The spring sun lit State University's graduation ceremony with a brilliance that seemed to promise endless possibilities. Among the sea of caps and gowns stood 22-year-old Marcus Thompson, wearing gold honor cords for graduating summa cum laude. His college years had been a blur of academic triumphs, community service, and preparation for his dream career in law enforcement. In the front row sat Thor, now 12 years old, wearing a vest embroidered with "Still Marcus's Hero." Age had touched the German shepherd. Gray whiskers, slower steps, but his eyes still glimmered with loyalty. Beside him, Peterson watched with pride. "I can't believe he's graduating already," Sarah Thompson whispered, dabbing at her eyes. "Feels like yesterday he was reading to me from library books in our apartment." Marcus had done more than excel academically. His senior thesis, Community Policing and Youth Engagement, Building Trust Through Understanding, was already influencing departments in 15 states. He'd been accepted into the State Police Academy. 2 weeks later, Marcus began training at the State Police Academy. The program pushed him physically and mentally, but his ability to read situations and people stood out. "Thompson," said Sergeant Martinez after a tense simulation, "you've got the best situational awareness I've seen in 15 years." Selection for the K-9 unit was rare for new recruits, but Marcus's history with Thor made him a natural choice. His assigned partner, Rex, was a spirited 2-year-old German shepherd whose alert eyes and eager obedience reminded Marcus of Thor in his prime. Then came the unexpected twist. Peterson, now retired, brought Thor to help train Rex. The old dog became an unspoken mentor, demonstrating search techniques, proper alerts, and calm control. Watching Thor guide Rex was like seeing a master craftsman pass down secrets to an apprentice. Marcus became the bridge between the two dogs, translating Thor's subtle signals into guidance for Rex. The partnership flourished, and soon Rex mirrored Thor's balance of discipline and empathy. Officer Sandra Kim, the K-9 supervisor, told Marcus, "Your bond with Rex is developing faster than I have ever seen." Marcus also became a resource for his fellow cadets, sharing his philosophy. Police work wasn't just about enforcing laws. It was about building trust and solving root problems. In a simulated domestic dispute, he connected the family to counseling and financial aid, rather than just filing a report. Instructors called it advanced community policing. When academy graduation arrived, Marcus stood ready, not just as an officer, but as a bridge between community and law enforcement. Thor's lessons lived in his every action, and Rex was now a confident, capable partner. His first patrol assignment brought him back to where it all began, Roosevelt Elementary School, the corner where he'd once sold candy to survive. Now, at 23, Officer Marcus Thompson walked that route in uniform, sworn to protect it. Rex, now 3, moved with perfect precision at his side, alert yet gentle, especially with children. As they approached the crosswalk, Mrs. Chen, the longtime crossing guard, called out, "I remember when you used to sell candy here. Look at you now." Marcus smiled. "And you always bought 2 Kit Kats, even when you only wanted 1." Then came the moment that tied past and present together. Peterson arrived, guiding Thor, who walked slowly but proudly. The old dog's eyes found Marcus, and in that look was the entire journey. The alley where they'd met, the battles they'd fought, the lessons they'd shared. Peterson placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You've become the kind of officer communities need. Someone who builds relationships, not just cases." The boy who once measured success by candy sales was now a sworn officer. Thor's age was evident in his measured movements and gray-muzzled face, but his eyes remained bright with intelligence, and his tail wagged with genuine joy at seeing Marcus in his police uniform. The circle of their relationship felt complete. The injured dog, who had inspired a boy's dream, was now witnessing that boy's achievement as a police officer. "Thor wanted to see you start your first day," Peterson explained, his own emotion evident as he watched the reunion between Marcus and the dog who had shaped his destiny. "I think he understands this is where it all began." Marcus knelt beside Thor, scratching behind the old dog's ears with the same gentle attention he had shown throughout their years together. "We did it, boy," he whispered. "From that alley to this moment, we both made it to where we were supposed to be." The Thor's Heroes program that Marcus established at Roosevelt Elementary combined his law enforcement responsibilities with his passion for youth development. Every Friday afternoon, he would visit classrooms with Rex, and often with Thor when the older dog's health permitted, teaching children about courage, community service, and the importance of helping others. Being a hero doesn't mean you have to do something famous or dramatic, Marcus would tell groups of wide-eyed elementary students. Sometimes being a hero means helping your little sister with homework, or checking on an elderly neighbor, or standing up for someone who's being bullied. Thor taught me that real heroes protect others, even when it's difficult or dangerous. The children responded to Marcus with enthusiasm that went beyond typical police school presentations. They saw in him someone who understood their neighborhoods, their families' struggles, and their potential for greatness, despite challenging circumstances. More importantly, they saw proof that dreams could become reality through education, hard work, and community support. Tony Rivera, now 16 and a junior at Roosevelt High School, approached Marcus after one of the elementary school presentations with news that brought tears to the officer's eyes. "I'm graduating early and got accepted to State University," Tony announced proudly. "Full scholarship, just like you. And I want to study criminal justice too." Marcus remembered Tony as the 10-year-old who had taken over his candy-selling corner years earlier, and seeing the teenager's transformation represented the broader impact that Marcus hoped his work would have on young people throughout the community. The radio on Marcus's shoulder crackled with a call that would test his training and principles. "Domestic dispute on Maple Street. Family with children involved, requesting officer response." Maple Street was 3 blocks from Roosevelt Elementary, in a neighborhood Marcus knew intimately from his childhood years. As he and Rex responded to the call, Marcus felt the weight just to enforce laws, but to help families navigate crises with dignity and hope. The scene they encountered was heartbreakingly familiar. A mother trying to manage multiple young children while dealing with financial stress. A father struggling with unemployment and the shame of being unable to provide for his family. And children, caught in the middle of adult problems they couldn't understand or solve. "My name is Officer Thompson," Marcus introduced himself with the calm authority he had developed through years of training and experience. "Can you tell me what's happening here and how I can help?" Instead of simply managing the immediate conflict, Marcus applied the community policing principles that had guided his academic research and personal development. He listened to both parents' concerns, identified the underlying issues contributing to their stress, and connected them with community resources that could address their practical needs while preserving their family unity. "There's a program that helped my family when I was younger," Marcus explained to the couple, handing them information about the Community Heroes Fund that continue to assist families in crisis. "Sometimes people just need temporary support to get through difficult times. That doesn't make you failures as parents. It makes you smart enough to accept help when help is available." As Marcus completed his first call as a police officer, writing a report that focused on resources provided rather than citations issued, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. The scared 11-year-old who had once run toward gunfire to save a wounded dog had become a police officer dedicated to ensuring that other families would receive the support his family had needed. Rex walked beside him as they returned to patrol, the young German shepherd alert and ready for whatever challenges their shift might bring. In the distance, Marcus could see Thor resting in the shade beside Peterson's car, the old dog's presence serving as a reminder of the courage, loyalty, and service that had inspired everything Marcus had become. The cycle of compassion and protection that had begun in an alley 8 years earlier continued to ripple outward, touching new lives, creating new possibilities, and proving that sometimes the smallest acts of bravery could indeed change the world. One family, one child, one moment of courage at a time. Officer Marcus Thompson was exactly where he belonged, protecting and serving the community that had helped him discover his own potential for heroism, carrying forward the legacy of a German shepherd who had shown him that true heroes protect those who cannot protect themselves. Marcus and Thor's story reminds us of something profound, that the bond between a human and a dog transcends words, circumstances, and time itself. Thor didn't just save Marcus that day in the alley. He showed him what unconditional loyalty looks like, what courage means, and how love can transform even the darkest moments into something beautiful. German shepherds, like Thor, possess an almost mystical ability to see into our hearts, to sense when we need protection, comfort, or simply a faithful companion who believes in us when we can't believe in ourselves. They give us their whole hearts, asking for nothing but our love in return. Every dog owner knows that special feeling, that moment when you look into your dog's eyes and realize they understand you completely. If you've been feeling like there might be even deeper ways to connect with your own companion, you might find it helpful to explore some gentle training approaches that honor that sacred bond between you and your dog. Because at the end of the day, our dogs don't just change our lives. They save our souls.